Welcome to the Nourish You Podcast, where we question the traditional model of dieting and nutrition and focus on choice, fun, and health for the whole mind, body, and spirit. I'm Jana Maurer, a non-traditional registered dietitian and well-being expert, and I want to challenge you to take 2% of your day today, listen to this episode, and make this your health win for the day. Pop in your earbuds, strap on your walking shoes, or pour a big glass of wine, whatever you need for today, and tune out the world as much as you can for the next 30 minutes, and let's fill up your cup. All right, welcome to the Nourish You Podcast. For today, I have Caitlyn Hunter joining me. She is a fellow dietitian. I am super excited about this topic because it is something that I think is just another example of how we go into extremes when it comes to health and wellness. And I saw Caitlyn's post on this topic, so I'm super excited to have her to share a little bit more. Caitlyn, thank you so much for joining and welcome to the Nourish You Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to talk more about this.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. We were just, chatting before we started recording, and Caitlyn and I met about 3 years ago during a mastermind. Like I said, we're both registered dietitians and coaches supporting women. And Caitlyn, I thought you were the perfect person to talk on this topic. So tell me a little bit about yourself and why this topic really was something that you were very passionate about.
Yeah, so my name is Caitlyn Hunter. I'm a registered dietitian. I live in Michigan, and I have my own virtual nutrition coaching business. And I really love helping women learn how to fuel their bodies right, ditch the restrictive diets, and learn how to be strong and empowered, not just physically, but mentally as well. Because I feel like diets really tear us down mentally and make us feel so horrible and weak and damaged. So really learning to build women back up and show them how good they can feel when they fuel their bodies properly. And that comes from a personal experience. I can remember back in 5th grade, realizing, oh, my belly is bigger than some of these other girls in class. And luckily, my disordered eating didn't start until high school. And I got more into volleyball, and we're in the tight little spandex shorts and tight jerseys, and realizing I was still bigger. I've always been more of a muscular build, and I was bigger than all of my friends. So I realized if I just skip breakfast, or if I only have a salad for lunch. My parents started doing the South Beach diet around this time. So I was, of course, doing that with them and cutting out carbs, and realized I can lose weight this way. Then I was also exercising excessively for 2 hours a day. But then I would totally swing the opposite direction and binge on literally bags of chips at a time. So that kind of pushed me to become a registered dietitian. After volleyball, I got into weightlifting, which is where I actually met my husband, was in the gym. And he's the one that introduced me to CrossFit. He started getting me into it, and I kind of said, well, that looks kind of fun. It's different than just regular weightlifting. Our good friend opened his own CrossFit gym. And CrossFit actually really helped me change my perspective on my body and my food. Because before, I was following all of these bodybuilding women, doing the bikini shows, and all about being so lean, eating minimally on what they ate. And I was afraid to eat ketchup because I had too much sugar, and I was forcing myself to eat mustard only and gagging on my food. So finding CrossFit was such a breath of fresh air, because, and I was lucky that my gym owner is like this, but it was more of an emphasis on what can your body do versus what does your body look like. And it's really when I found this passion to say, okay, can I lift heavier? Can I start doing these movements? Because luckily with CrossFit, there's a lot of progression. Can I start doing more of these complex movements, these harder movements? Can I get better at this sport? And a lot less focus was placed on what do I look like? And at the same time, I was also going to school to be a registered dietitian. So I was learning so much about food, and it all just kind of started to click that, if I want to feel better and do better, I need to stop only trying to eat fish and vegetables, and I need to fuel my body properly. Yeah. And it really did help me so much. And I see that for a lot of women. But then CrossFit itself has some very problematic nutrition advice, which is what my post was about the other week.
Yeah. Well, Caitlyn, even as you are describing your experience, not only in your own journey, but also how CrossFit was really healing for you, I think that is, highlights this idea that there is no one solution for every person. And there are different modalities that are going to help support the individual based on your personality, based on your desires, based on, what's going to work for you. And as you were sharing that story, I was just like, that's so healing in so many different ways. But I do like that you note that in some arenas of CrossFit, just, depending on many different aspects, there can be that continuation of, let's just say, like diet culture or the extreme aspects. And CrossFit did come out on July 27th on their Instagram, and they put out their fitness in 100 words, which was not only fitness, but it also did have the nutrition component to it. And that was what you addressed in your post so eloquently and so succinctly, and got a lot of feedback from it. So that's what we're really going to dive into today. So I'm just going to read the post. If you don't follow them, or if you want to go follow them and read the whole post, you certainly can. I'm not going to read through all of it because as Caitlyn and I were going through it, I couldn't pronounce some of the exercises. So we'll just go with that. But as it relates to the nutrition factor, they said, eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. That is in bold words and in red, no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise, but not body fat. They also suggest practice and train, master the basics of gymnastics, hard and fast, 5 or 6 days per week. Mix these elements in many combinations and patterns. Routine is the enemy. Keep workouts short and intense. Regularly learn and play new sports. So that's the gist of their post. Now, from your perspective, Caitlyn, what really stands out to you, and why did you want to share a little bit more information on this?
Yeah, so this fitness in 100 words has been around in CrossFit for years. What made them recently repost it, I don't know, but that's what kind of sparked my fire to be like, okay, they're bringing this up. I'm talking about this, and lots of other dietitians were. So this is not just my personal view. I'm not just hating on CrossFit because obviously I love the sport.
Yeah.
But what made you say, hey, come on the podcast is you commented, and I forget your exact words, but I told you, oh my gosh, I could talk about this for hours because there's a lot of problematic statements in here and there's so many layers to it. But CrossFit's view, their own personal view of this, is that this is their prescription for health, right? They fully believe this. They think that if you follow this, you will be healthy. There will be no issues. You won't have diabetes. You won't have heart health. You'll be great. And in some aspects, yes, they're promoting mostly whole foods. They're promoting movement. I can get behind that. Right? That's what I promote with my clients is, hey, let's eat mostly whole foods. But one of the biggest problems is that there's a lot of restriction in their nutrition statement. Little starch, no sugar in big, bold red letters. It's not only bad nutrition advice for athletes, but it's so restrictive that it absolutely leads to disordered eating, fear of foods, very restrictive eating. I've worked with CrossFit athletes who are afraid to eat a carb that's not oatmeal or sweet potatoes. Mm-hmm. They feel like a processed food is the worst thing that they could possibly do, and they're afraid to eat it. And it's not good. I actually had someone reach out to me after I posted this and said, thank you. I've been struggling, recovering from an eating disorder. I just saw their post and it almost had me spiraling. So I think what CrossFit doesn't understand is that there's so many layers to health, and health is just what you eat and how you move your body. It's also your mental health. And if our very restrictive eating pattern leads you to be stressed out, possibly developing something like orthorexia, that's not healthy, right? That's not good. And also, if you're well fueled for your workouts, that's not healthy either. Yeah. So that's kind of the two major themes that I get from their nutrition advice.
Yeah. So, and I always get super confused. So maybe we can talk through this because I'm sure that those that are tuning in could also be confused around this. I'm always confused, particularly as it relates to performance or, strength or being in the gym. I'm always very just interested in why carbs get attacked so much, especially from, again, that performance angle is carbs are our optimal fuel source in order to perform not only in the gym, but just in life in general. And our brain, I say this all the time to my coaching clients, your brain alone needs 130 grams of carbohydrates just to function. So why do carbs get such a bad rap? Not only, I mean, I feel like in general, right? Like just in weight loss, even if you're not, exercising 4, 5, 6 times, whatever. But then also when it comes to athletes, that's a big one that gets noted. Why do you think that is?
I feel like that's the question of the decade, right? Like, why are carbs getting so hated on?
Yeah.
I think it stems back to some of that bodybuilding mentality that to get super lean, they often restrict and reduce their carbohydrate intake. And that's also noted in CrossFit's statement, right? Eat enough to support exercise, but not body fat. And again, like it's a really big problem, not just with CrossFit, but I think with a lot of female and male athletes, that you overtrain, you work out too much, and then they don't eat enough to support all the exercise that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And that kind of comes from a body image standpoint, right? We want to be lean. They want to have the 6-pack because they feel like that's what an athlete should look like. So then they're afraid to eat more, and then they're not properly eating enough. I've seen women lose their period from not eating enough and having too low levels of body fat. So yeah, why carbs get the bad rap, I'm not sure, because they are the preferred fuel source, especially with CrossFit. Right? Mm-hmm. CrossFit is very high intense, right? Just like they say in their statement, hard and fast, short and intense workouts. And when we're relying on that anaerobic activity, you're trying to weight lift heavy, breathing super deep and easily as you're lifting heavy weight. Same thing when you're trying to do a really fast workout. You're not breathing deeply. You're relying on your carb stores that are in your muscles for that fuel. So to me, their statement just shows that they're not looking at the science. They're not looking at what's best for performance. They kind of take a stance with the paleo diet. The paleo diet or the zone diet have been big with CrossFit. And again, it's not following the data of what's best supported for athletes. And an athlete doesn't have to be like someone who's high up in the sport and a really good, person in CrossFit. It can be your regular person who comes in 3 days a week, right? They're exercising. They should be thinking of themselves as an athlete and fueling their workouts. So it's really problematic.
Mm-hmm. What does the research say in this area? Because, this is always where I find myself in trying to balance. I mean, there's a lot of just different opinions within the space of health and wellness, right? There's a huge spectrum. And more, I would say that there's a conversation around more of that intuitive eating aspect and acceptance of different body sizes. And maybe we can go to the other side where it is, the CrossFit aspect, more intense workouts, more lean bodies, whatever. I don't know. There's a whole spectrum and people land where, maybe some people want to step into the intuitive eating aspect. Maybe some people want to go CrossFit, right? Like I always say, like, we have to match it to your personality. But where do you feel like this could potentially be leading people astray based on research? Like, how should we really navigate this information? Because certainly, like, as dietitians, we support people in achieving optimal health, right? Like not only performance, but also health. And so there's some of the things in here, like, yeah, I'm eat lean meat, right? Like eat your vegetables. I would say most people need to eat more vegetables. Mm-hmm. So there's key principles in here that we're like, yes, do this. where does it start to kind of shift and maybe not be so helpful then?
Yeah, well, I think even just looking at it from a performance perspective, first thing we need is adequate calorie consumption, right? This is so widely varied because it depends on your goals, right? Is your goal to perform better, to build muscle? Is it weight loss? So it varies widely. But even across all those goals, if you're working out with intensity like CrossFit, and that's what we have to remember. This is a very intense sport. We have to have adequate calorie intake. And a lot of these foods that they mentioned are generally lower in calories, but higher in volume. So with just eating meat, vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, which what does that mean? But some fruit, little starch, no sugar, you're left with a very probably low calorie diet, right? Unless you were eating a lot of these fat sources. So just from the research of showing like, how do we perform better? Well, we need adequate calorie consumption. With these limited foods, that becomes very difficult. Mm-hmm. And then when we add in the aspect of fullness, right, you're going to be very full from eating a lot of these very nutrient dense, higher volume, higher fiber foods. It can be really hard to meet your calorie needs without adding in something that may be a little bit more processed or may, have a little bit more sugar to it. Mm-hmm. So you have these athletes who aren't eating enough, who aren't meeting their calorie requirement. And that has been shown time and time again in research to be harmful when it comes to performance. And even just if we look at weight loss, if you're drastically under eating.
Mm-hmm. So true. And you mentioned something that I really want to highlight because I think this is just across the spectrum. And again, mainly for women, that is an area that I a focus area for coaching. 9 times out of 10, when I am looking through someone's dietary analysis, right? Like when we're looking at the foods that individuals consume, 9 times out of 10, they are consuming too high in fat. So they're doing more of the low carb aspect and they're eating handfuls of nuts and seeds that are, low carb, but they also are packing on the calories and then they're wondering why I can't lose weight. Right.
Yes. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Or, just even looking at from like a cardiovascular perspective, like eating large amounts of protein, but it's from saturated fat sources. Bacon is like a huge one right now. And thinking, oh my gosh, I'm doing good because it's like low carb or keto style. And then they come and they're like, but my cholesterol is high and my LDL is high. I don't understand what's going on. And I will say like 9 times out of 10, it's from fat sources. So why, what is that shift? Because I know there's a lot of research or just like propaganda out there around like fat and how it can convert into energy and like all this other stuff. So how did that come about? Like what's going on with that?
Yeah. And I think it's really ignoring the science of the benefits of fiber, right? We have so many studies show benefits of fiber for heart health, for gut health, for blood sugar management, for longevity. And if we're reducing fruits and starches, those are 2 of our main sources of fiber. And something that they don't even mention in the statement is beans. But if we look at the paleo diet, they don't really eat beans. So there's another source of fiber that we're missing. So from a health perspective, it's like, why aren't we looking at all this science, CrossFit? Like what about all of this? Right. And of course, overall, the sources of our carbohydrates matter, right? Sure. Like eating these higher fiber ones most of the time. But then again, when we look at performance, when we're going to go work out, you don't want to be eating a ton of fiber right before a high intense workout. Your stomach is going to be a wreck. You're not going to feel good as you're jumping around, running around, and you've got all this fiber or all this fat sitting in your stomach. It's not what's best because it's slowly digesting. So as you're working out, your body is still digesting that food and it does not leave you feeling very good. So when we look at fueling for workout, I think something that is higher in carbohydrates, lower in fats, lower in fiber, can still have some protein, but that's what's going to make you feel so much better and perform so much better in your workouts.
Yeah. So true. I'm literally having flashbacks from when I trained for my marathons, and it was so difficult. Like even for myself, it was difficult to like wrap my head around, okay, I'm going to have these simple carbohydrates before I go out for a 20-mile run because I don't want it to be heavy on my stomach. I want the quick energy, and it really doesn't matter, it matters from a performance angle, right? Of like the energy that is required in order to perform. But from like even a weight perspective or whatnot, I had to get over this idea of like, oh my gosh, it's not the healthiest carb that I'm eating at this time. What do you wish that more people understood as it relates to nutrition and performance?
I wish that people understood kind of like what you just mentioned. There's a difference between just eating healthy and eating for performance, and they can absolutely go together. But like if we look at carbohydrates, right, there's your everyday carbohydrates, like your oatmeal, your whole wheat breads and pastas and beans and quinoa. Eating those before your workout, that's not going to make you feel good. Or maybe in your workout, like when you were doing your very long runs, maybe you needed something for fuel to keep you going. You don't want to be eating a piece of whole wheat bread. You want something like the little goo that's pretty much just straight sugar. So there's a difference between like eating for just your health and then eating carbohydrates that are fueling for performance. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that you're either paying attention to health or to performance. They can definitely go hand in hand because it's what you eat the majority of the time. And again, if you're a well-fed, properly fueled athlete, you're going to be a healthy athlete. So it's really distinguishing like, okay, there's more to think about than I just need to eat only clean foods or only healthy foods all the time. It's more complex than that.
Hey everyone, it's Jana, and I wanted to interrupt your content real quick to tell you about something that I've been using every single day, OWYN protein drink. I've been using it for the last year now and absolutely love this product. It's been something that's been so helpful to meet my protein needs, to meet my calorie needs, and to meet my overall nutrition and performance goals. I am super picky when it comes to recommending different products or supplements because I take a whole foods-based approach. So I highly encourage you to check this out for yourself, see if you like it. I do have a discount code for you. You can click the link in the show notes below. At checkout, you can put JanaM20 to get 20% off and check it out for yourself. Now back to the episode. Yes. And Caitlyn, as you're talking and as you're sharing, I am literally thinking of like how thankful I am for dietitians, like in the space of like you are showing how like the critical thinking aspect as it relates to food. And I always share this of like you can ask me a question and I'll probably say it depends. Or with nutrition, it's all relative, right? It's all relative to the person. For example, you're not going to have the same recommendations, maybe say carb wise for someone that's sedentary as you are for someone that is a performance athlete, right? Like there's going to be different recommendations. And so when we're looking at these nutrition or food statements, it is really our job as a dietitian to sit back and say, but is that right for this person? And that's what I think a lot of times like gets neglected is there's just these like blanket statements of this is what you should do. And they don't even know who you are, right? Like they don't even know or the individual is not taking an assessment of their own needs and their own like goals with their lifestyle, right? Like, so it's like, okay, well, yeah, I think we can all agree that we should not eat so much processed sugar, right? Like to really look at how much sugar are you taking in? Like in no way are we advocating for large amounts of sugar to be consumed in your diet. But when statements always say no, or don't do this, or you can't have this, that just is such a red flag for me to say, wait. Okay, how can this actually be applied to your real life? So for example, like why would it be actually necessary to have sugar for a performance athlete? Like why would they need it?
Before I answer that, I want to back up because you totally hit the nail on the head with saying like it's such a problem to have these kind of blanket statements that an organization like CrossFit is a huge organization. There are CrossFit gyms everywhere, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And they're putting out this information like it's fact, like it's true. And it's just a general statement that they're saying everyone should abide by. And it's not taking into account everyone's circumstances. Like nutrition is so individualized. I just thinking of the people who are at my gym. Everyone comes in different amounts of days. Everyone has different goals when they're there. They just there to move, or they there because they want to compete. So the amount of carbohydrates, the amount of sugar, the amount of food in general is going to look very different person to person. And even with their statement, what about people who want to eat vegetarian and you're telling them they need to eat meat? These blanket statements from organizations that have humongous influence. And then there's the issue that they're not a nutrition organization, right? Like what credentials, what authority do you have to even be talking about nutrition? And if they would work with more dietitians, oh my God, I would love it. I've thought that for years. Like, please just get more dietitians on your staff, because not only do they talk about nutrition widely on like their social media posts, but they also talk about nutrition in their like seminars. So to become a CrossFit coach, you go to a level 1 seminar and they talk about nutrition there. And that's problematic because these people talking about nutrition likely are not dietitians, and they're talking to people who likely are not dietitians, but they're giving them all this nutrition information and making them feel like just because they're now a CrossFit coach, they can talk about nutrition. And it really perpetuates this idea that just because you have a little bit of knowledge, you can give nutrition information, you can be coaching on nutrition, when really they don't have the credentials to do that. So I think it's a very slippery slope when an organization like CrossFit starts giving recommendations on things that are outside of their lane. Mm-hmm. They need to stay in their lane, focus on fitness. They can have their view of fitness all they want, but they're not a nutrition organization.
Yeah. The idea of scope is just like so big in this arena. A couple of things come to mind. I also am a certified diabetes educator, and this is a big one, like especially when carbs start getting thrown out left and right, and an individual that is, diagnosed either pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes in particular. Those are the two biggest ones. And they start getting active and they go to CrossFit, and then they're like, this wasn't a CrossFit gym, but this was another gym that was similar in nature. And they handed out a meal plan of like, okay, this is what you do. And I got so upset. Like I literally I was like, I need to talk to you, like the client, I need to talk to you, because they were starting to implement some of these recommendations that had less than 80 grams of carbs for the day. They were already on a medication to lower their blood sugar, and they were working out. I was like, this could create harm. Like you could literally land in the hospital because your blood sugar is too low. Like it was so upsetting to me. I was like, this is not okay. And that is out of scope. So stop doing it. Like, I want to be very like clear about this for those that are tuning in. This is out of scope for a gym to be able to provide those recommendations, particularly if you are trying to manage a chronic disease, whether it be blood pressure or blood sugar. Those are the two biggest ones usually. We really need to have that medical nutrition therapy lens, and we really need to support you in many different aspects than these cookie cutter meal plans that are made for the masses and not made for you. So I'm sorry, I could get on a soapbox on that one, but I think it's so true.
It is, because, like these organizations, whether it's CrossFit, whether it's, a personal trainer, like they mean well, right? Yes. They do. Yeah. I don't think they mean to cause harm. They don't, but they don't understand the complications of it. Mm-hmm. That's why, like when I'm creating a post, I'm sure you do the same thing. I'm thinking of all the different, like, how could someone interpret this? How could this apply to someone's situation? Because it's so diverse and there's so many aspects to nutrition that I think these they don't understand. They don't understand the complications of it. So they just put out these blanket statements or they hand out plans. It's like, there's so much more to it than this.
Yeah, so much more. And this is the power of working with a dietitian, is that you get that so much more so that you can actually understand the why behind why it's important for you to eat a certain way versus getting recommendations that are basically told to you and that really haven't been created for you. So again, just another reason to plug our profession. And then also I wanted to just note, like anytime, so I have a little note that says like no carbs or like no sugar or no fill in the blank. Why would that be? Like, I always want to give people like information and knowledge and understanding so that they can feel empowered in understanding like what works best for them. Why are those some keywords for us, Caitlyn, that we say, like we step back and say, that might not be the best route? Like, why is like a no carb statement or no processed foods? Like, why are those certain things that we are just like, let's think about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, just from a general standpoint, I mean, the restrictive nature of no sugar, first, they contradict themselves because they say fruit. You can have fruit, but then no sugar. So, if you read deeper into their statements, they say you can have sugar from natural sources, but no like added sugar. Then they also said in that post on their Instagram, no artificial sweeteners either, even though we have lots of research that show that artificial sweetener consumption is safe. So they pick and choose what research they want to follow, of course, but just the restrictive nature can really damage someone's relationship with food. To say, oh my gosh, I can't have that piece of chocolate, or I can't have that birthday cake on my son's birthday. But then they do because they're human and they're trying to live a normal life. And then they develop, severe guilt. Maybe they binge, and that's harming their health more than having that occasional sweet or sweets. I have a piece of chocolate every day, like having a controlled amount of sugar intentionally while the rest of your day is balanced and has lots of nutrient dense foods. It's what you do the majority of the time that matters. So if we're causing someone to binge eat or to feel extreme shame and food guilt, like that's more negative on their health than having a small amount of sugar daily. So just from that perspective. But when we look at the performance perspective, so to give you an example, I did a CrossFit competition a few weekends ago. We had 4 total workouts in the course of one day, and we had 2 hours in between each workout. Not really long enough to have a full meal, but you definitely needed to eat, right? So that's when I was eating something like a fruit snack, most like purely sugar, because I needed to get calories. I needed to get carbohydrates for fuel, but I needed something that was very low in fiber and something that my stomach would tolerate, and something that honestly, I wasn't that hungry, right? When you're working out intensely, a lot of times you're not hungry. So to get something that is very low in volume, but that I could get a lot of calories in, fruit snacks or sugar was it. So in like a competition setting, sugar is necessary. And, even just in normal day to day, like if you're preparing for pre-workout, people work out in the morning, first thing in the morning, 5:00 class. I think they're crazy, but so many people do it every day and good for them. But they're there at 5 a.m. and I hear, Caitlyn, I'm not hungry, or I don't want to wake up any earlier than I have to. I said, well, drink a glass of orange juice. Oh, but that's sugar. Well, it's going to be really easy to digest. You're going to get calories and carbs and the fuel that you need. And then you can come home and have a more balanced meal after your workout. So, it's absolutely necessary for both just our general quality of life and then for performance. And research has shown that just sugar alone is not causing our issues, right? Not just singularly high sugar intake. That was the problem. I think we would see all this low carb dieting would be making us healthier. Our problem would be getting better, but it's not. So not singularly sugar. And if we have a controlled portion of sugar in our day and what we're eating the majority of the time is balanced, we still have really great health outcomes.
Yeah, so true. I think there was study that came out from the Institute of Medicine that showed that our consumption of carbohydrates in particular has gone down over the last 40 years. And yet our BMI has increased. So this is what I love too, right? Like it's so often we can be so micro focused, right? Like, oh, I can't have this food or that food. And working, and understanding health and nutrition, it really allows you to expand out and see like a much broader view. And then we can really start to question of like, okay, so we see a trend in decreasing as a nation. We are eating less carbs overall than we did 40 years ago. But as a nation, we are now at a higher weight than we were 40 years ago. So why are we receiving all this information to cut out carbs? And it also allows us to say like, okay, but no carbs. So that means no, like you said earlier, no fruits, no beans, no whole grains, no technically vegetables, because there's carbohydrates in those, regardless if they're starchy or non-starchy. So it's like, what the heck? And this again is what I want to empower women with, is to be able, or anyone, right? Like, or men tuning in, like to empower you to be able to assess the information that is coming into you, sit with it and be able to say, okay, but how does this apply to my situation, my lifestyle? And how can I really continue to progress my health so that I am taking care of it? I am nourishing my body for the desires that I have moving forward. I think that's so, so key when we're looking at anything that's health related, whether it be nutrition or exercises or whatnot. Because I know they also mentioned like 5 to 6 days a week for physical activity. And even reading that, I'll say like, I was like, oh, I can't do that. Like 5 to 6 days a week, like every week I would be out. Like I would be a failure. Like I just couldn't achieve that just with my schedule and everything else that life has. I'd be like, oh, okay, I can't do that. So
yes,
I think that's another thing that you teach too, of like being realistic for yourself as well.
Yes. Well, and I think a lot of these statements make people feel like a failure. Like, oh, if I eat sugar, I'm a failure. If I'm not training hard enough or intense enough, I'm a failure. If I'm not doing it 5 to 6 days a week, I'm a failure. We're already hard on ourselves as it is when we're trying to make healthy habits and make lifestyle changes. Everyone's so hard on themselves, at least in my experience with my clients. And if we add in these really high and unrealistic standards for most people, it's not helping us make changes. It's actually hindering us. It's keeping us stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then we don't even engage with it of like, oh, I can't do 5 to 6 days a week, so I'm not going to do anything, versus saying, but I can do 2 or 3, and, going from there and, being able to evolve from there as well. Well, Caitlyn, so I'm sure we could talk about so many different aspects as it relates to nutrition for, like you said, hours. What is something that you want to leave individuals with that are tuning into this episode? Like, what are some of the key takeaways that you want them to have?
Yeah, well, one of the main things is that understanding that being healthy, and whether this is CrossFit, whether this is running, any sport, this applies to any athlete, is that being healthy means that you're also well fed and you're properly fueled for your sport, that those things do go hand in hand. If you're only eating healthy foods, but you're not fueling your body properly for your workouts, not only are you not going to feel good or not see the results that you want, but that's actually not leaving healthy. So being a well-fed, properly fueled athlete is important. And that can look like having carbs, and you actually need lots of them. And it doesn't have to be restrictive in any nature, because it really is the bigger picture of your nutrition, right? How are you pairing your foods together? What does your overall diet look like? It's not just, did you eat sugar or did you not? So nutrition is much more complex, and there's way more to it than just eating this strict list of foods.
Yeah. It is a science, right? And it's a practicing science, because each and every person is different, and what works for one may not work for the other. So certainly. Well, Caitlyn, I am so, so thankful for you sharing your expertise, and just being able to open the space for conversation to say it's okay to fuel your body. It's okay to nourish your body, and the performance will be there. So again, I thank you so much. And I'm really excited to hear what others will think on this topic.
Thank you. Yeah. And not only will your performance be there, but your results will be too. I think that's something that I had to realize, that when I started fueling my body properly, I actually saw the physical results that I wanted and had been working for years for never. And my clients experienced that too. It's like, oh, if I actually eat right and eat enough, I see the results that I want. So not only will you perform way better, feel way better, and then you'll see the physical results that you want too.
Yes, I love that because we are going after that, right? Like we're going after health and health performance and results, right? Like they can all be. That's kind of like the little triangle that we really want is like the health, the performance, and to be able to feel like, satisfied with the results that we are able to achieve when we give ourselves that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I could go on for hours, but thank you so much for having me on. It was great to talk about this, and I hope your listeners enjoy it.
Thanks, Caitlyn. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day-to-day to tune in. If you love today's content, leave me a review letting me know exactly what you liked best, and remember to share my podcast with others to join the Nourish You community. If you want more great content like this between episodes, I encourage you to join my mailing list. You can click the link below in the show notes or check out my website at www.healthwins.org, and let's stay in touch. Until next time, I'm Jana. Talk soon.